Just quickly going to bash together a spec map. I don't really work up too much of the specular in this tutorial, basically because the two things I'm focusing on are fine displacement and layering up color, and kind of using Mari as a way of layering color and displacement information. But it's necessary just to get some specular breakup on these horns. And you might notice I haven't started at a mid-gray point. I'm cheating this. I wouldn't generally do this in production. I'd start at a mid-gray, and in this case I'm going much darker than mid-gray, just because I know that that's where I want my specular at this time. So instead of remapping it in the shader, I'm basically just being lazy. You can see that I'm using a repeatable texture, and I've switched my paint through mode to repeat texture, so I can run straight off the edge of the border and it will keep applying the texture. You might notice I'm using a 4K paint buffer, yet I'm using 8K resolution, which might lead you to question my choice in doing that. As I said, it is totally excessive resolution, but it means that when I paint into it, when I zoom in, I will have I'll up my resolution, so if I want to put any kind of fine cracks in, they'll be as sharp as I can possibly have them, and then I can choose to down-res later. I'll generally just do a test and find out if I need to have it that high, or I can take it down to 4K or 2K or whatever. So yeah, just doing a really quick and dirty spec map here, just to break things up. If I have time, I'll come back and add scratches and possibly take some information from my fine displacement I painted earlier and blend it into the horns, but we'll just see how we go. Most of this is I'm painting over 2 days. I'm giving myself 2 days. Well, I recorded 13 hours of footage, so I'm taking that as roughly 2 days work on it. So it really is just kind of a first pass. A lot of what we do as texture artists, as I'm sure you know, is incredibly time consuming and is a process that goes on for weeks and months. Hopefully not years, but yeah, just kind of showing you a first pass and the working method that allows me to revisit any information that I've put down while dealing with multi-patches, multi-patched models very quickly. It's interesting how much that horn reads like wood. I think that might be a bad move, and I might have to introduce something along the way to define it as not being wood, but we'll see how we go. Here I'm just picking out some kicks out of the fine displacement that I just want to get a spec kick on. I'm not really working into it too much, I'm just trying to define it as a different material from the skin. I'm using a very, my test render setup is an incredibly basic setup, so depending on if you're working in a production pipeline or if you're just working at home, you know, sometimes you'll want to make your specular changes and your maps and the values of your maps over the whole bust, or you'd be using a layered shader setup. But yeah, you really need to know what you're working with. I'm using an incredibly basic test render shader here. If I wasn't, I'd probably do the whole map valued completely from black to white so that I can blend it into my shader setup. But I'm just using the spec to try and pull some contrast between each of those the shells on the horns, the areas. It's odd that horn I'm using as reference gets less specular towards the tips, which isn't what I would have expected. It does also at the base. It seems to just have the middle area that gets the most kicks. Sometimes when I'm painting specular maps like this, I'll start with the base and then paint. I'll use a lot of dodge and burn to basically just pull highs and lows out of it, the same way that you would in Photoshop. Just adding some moisture under the connecting point of the lower eyelid. I find it quite necessary to get the specular, get at least just a rough spec map together for the moist areas, especially around the eyes and stuff. Just otherwise, if you're doing a test render, even though your shader's far from locked down, you can lose colors that you thought were strong around your eyes and your reds and blues and whatever you want to use in there. Hence just bashing one together pretty quickly. I'm just wanting to get a little bit of color breakup down the horn. So I'm just making a quick stencil. Just jumping over to Photoshop, and I don't want it to look like wood, as I said before, but I'm just using it for the grain, avoiding anything that's not like, and just pulling some organic lines basically. I'm just going to use it to stencil the golden brown color down the horns. Combination of the yeah, I'm just using the horn mask to keep it off the skin. Just trying out different blending modes, and I've gone for a darken. Just try and get some lines in there. And again, just following the UV layout as it's matching the topology that bands around the horns. Burning my shadows to strengthen up the dark points in the mask. Definitely not being too tidy about this, as I'm going to remove a lot of it. I'm not terribly worried about the color information in the horns, as they're it's first pass and I'm just getting something on them, but B, they're very dark and most of it's just going to come from specularity and fine displacement. So yeah, after pulling some lines into that gold mask, I'm now using it to as a channel mask, as I just want to knock some of the specularity out of those areas. Just my references and patches, especially close to the base of the horn, where there seem to be quite muted specularity with the golder colour. I'm masking the fine displacement just to add some variation. Really try and ramp up the definition between those steps. It's using the specularity to kind of cheat the sharpness of, or add to the sharpness of the stepping.